Bismillahir Rahmanir Raheem. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to my tutorial, my first tutorial that I've ever made. This is my first time making a tutorial, so please bear with me. But basically, I want to teach you today how to make a very simple game in pygame. Okay, using Python and pygame. So to just begin with, I'm going to show you how this game works. So I'm going to press play here. And here is the user on the screen who you can move with your basically keyboard, left, right, up and down keys. And you have to catch the star. And every time the user collides with the star, he gets a point. Okay. And you win. Okay. So this is the game, and it's going to restart and basically start again. Okay. So let me just close this here, and so let me show you how I made this game. So to begin with, I have Python already installed on my computer, and I have pygame installed on my computer. However, I'm going to be using PyCharm, which is a Python IDE. Okay, and I'm going to be starting by basically clicking here, File and New Project, and let's just call this Python Project 4, create a new window. And over here, so we've created a new project, and I'm going to right click over here, press New, and create a Python file. Okay, so now you can name this whatever you want except for pygame. Okay, so apparently if you use the word pygame, if you title your code pygame, it's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to call it main. Okay, because this is the main file. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to import pygame. Okay, so because PyCharm is apparently a virtual environment, okay, it needs you to install the modules or the libraries each time you create a new project. Okay, so I'm going to just right click here, show context actions, and install pygame. Okay, so now this is going to install pygame for me for this project. Okay. Once that is done, over here it said packages installed, successfully installed packages pygame. We're going to, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our window. Okay, so in order to set up our window, we need a width and a height. Okay, so pygame basically has its coordinate system works like this, where it starts at the top left corner. Okay, and the top left corner of the screen, which is, let's imagine that this is and basically you need to define the width and the height of this window. Okay, so I'm going to initialize two variables called width and height, and I'm just going to set them to 800 by 800. Okay, now in order to basically create a window on the screen, we're going to initialize a variable called window, and we're going to say pygame.display.setMode, and basically we're going to put in this tuple height and width and height. Okay, we're gonna pass through this tuple width and height to this function. Okay, so now this is our game window, and now we're going to basically give it a caption. Okay, so we're going to do pygame.display.setCaption, and let's call it simple game, because it's just a simple game. Okay, now that we've done this, okay, we are going to create our functions. Okay, we are going to create the functions that are going to run in this game. So we're going to first create our main function, so definition main, and we're going to create a draw function. Okay, so these are our two functions, main and draw. And what the main function does is it has all the main game logic in it, and the draw function, it is used to draw anything that we need to draw on the screen. Okay, so before we start doing this, let's just define our game loop. Okay, so we're going to say running is equal to true. While running, we're going to say for event in pygame.event.get. So PyCharm actually gives you suggestions on how to complete and on completing your code, so you can utilize that, and you can actually press tab, and if basically it has suggested the correct thing. So basically what we're doing here is we're actually also, let me just write down this code and let me explain it to you. So we created a variable called running, which we set to true, and then we created a while loop where we said while running is equal to true, what we want to do is we want to catch all the events in pygame.event.get. So we want to take all the events and we want to go through them. So if the event dot type is equal to pygame.quit, we want to set running is equal to false, which means that the loop ends. Okay, so now that we have our game loop running, okay, we have it running, we need to call these functions, the main and the draw function. So I'm just going to, for now, click right pass here, and then I'm going to call the main function. So if underscore underscore name underscore underscore is equal to underscore underscore main underscore underscore, then call the main function. Okay, and what this simply means is that anytime this file is run directly, the main function will be called. However, if we import this file into another file, we will not be calling main. Okay, so this is what it means. Okay, so now let me try and play this, and we have our screen come up. So right now nothing is happening because we have not done anything else except for set up the screen. So as you notice, our caption is simple game, and it's a black screen. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to change the fill of the black background to white. Okay, so before we do that, we need to initialize some variables, which is basically the RGB. These are the RGB values, red, green, blue values. Okay, and 255, 255, 255 makes white. I'm just going to click tab to complete that. And then we want black, which is 000, and we want red, which is 255, 00. 255, 00. Okay, so now that we have our colors, what we can do over here in draw, we can simply do window dot fill and white. Okay, it takes in white as the color, and then before we can see this on the screen, we need to do pygame dot display dot update. Okay, and this updates everything on the screen. So now if we click play, okay, why isn't it happening? Oh yeah, we did not call our draw function. Okay, as usual, I keep forgetting this. Okay, so over here in the while loop, we're going to call the draw function, and then we click play, and we have our white screen. So now what we're going to do is we are going to create the player. Okay, so we want to create the player on the screen. So before we can do that, we're going to set some player values. We're going to say player width is equal to 50, player height is equal to 50, and because the player moves on the screen, we have a player velocity, which we're going to set to 5. Okay, so we're going to do this, but actually before we do this, we're going to so we've set these values, player width, player height, and player velocity. Okay, where we've initialized these values. However, before we do that, we need to initialize another value, which is called FPS, which is frames per second, and we're going to set that to 60. Okay, so what frames per second means is that the frames, basically how many times is this basically program going to run in a second. So it's going to run 60 times per second. Okay, so 5 frames per second. So we want it to run at a constant rate every time, no matter what operating system it's running on, what computer it's running on, whatever it's running on. We want it to run at the same speed every single time. Okay, and so what we're going to do here is in our main function, we're going to initialize a value called clock. We're going to set to clock pygame.time.clock, and then we're going to, in our running loop, we're going to do clock.tick FPS. Okay, so now this will set our program to run at a set rate every single time. Okay, now we are going to create our player. Okay, so our player, so what we want to do here is we want to create a player variable. Player is equal to pygame.rect. Okay, and what we want to do is, now rect takes a basically left, so what it takes is an x and y value, and then it takes the width and height of the rect. Okay, so let me just show you what this means. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to actually draw the player in the middle of the screen. Okay, so in order to do that, we're going to use I'm going to show you an image that I made here. This is something that I made to show you how the coordinate system works in Pygame, and that is that the coordinate system works like this. Basically, everything is drawn from the top left corner of the screen, which is set to 0, 0. Okay, so the width is basically initialized here, and the height is initialized down here. So this is the x, and this is the y coordinate. Okay, so the positive x and the positive y, and if you want to draw something in the middle of the screen, like this box is set to the middle of the screen, okay, everything is drawn in pygame from the top left corner of the screen, top left corner of the object. So for example, this rect, it will be drawn from this point of the basically. So what we need to do is, in order to calculate this value that we want, that's over here, okay, we need to calculate that by first doing width over 2. Okay, so we want to, like, for example, the x value will be width over 2, which would give us this value over here. So it would give us the x over here. But we need to minus that from player width divided by 2. So that is going to give us this point, the x value over here. Same with the y. We need to calculate height over 2, which is going to give us this point over here. And then we need to minus the player height divided by 2. And that is going to give us the y value for this point. And that is then going to draw our square in the middle of the screen, okay? So what we're going to do here is we're going to go back here to our code, and we are going to do that, okay? So, just like I just explained over here in the previous window, I'm going to type in width divided by 2 minus player width divided by 2, and that is going to be our x coordinate. And then height divided by 2 minus player underscore height divided by 2, and that is going to be our y coordinate. And then for the width and height, we're just going to do player underscore width, which I initialized earlier, and player underscore height. Okay, now if I play this game, we're going to have the player at the middle of the screen. Yay! Okay, so now that we have the player in the middle of the screen, what we need to do is we need to make the player move. So how are we going to do that? Okay, so we're going to do that by first getting all of the key presses. Okay, so we're going to initialize a variable called keys, and we're going to set it to pygame.key.get underscore pressed. Okay, now this gives us all of the keys that are going to be pressed. Any keys that we're pressing, even if we're pressing left and right at the same time, it's going to get that key and it's going to put it in this variable called keys. Now we're going to create a function called handle underscore key presses, and we're going to pass in keys and the player. Okay, so let's take this function over here and let's copy it, and we're going to define it down here. We're going to pass in keys and player. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to check if the player has clicked the left button, the right button, the up and down button. Okay, so let's do over here keys, if keys, and then pygame dot k underscore left. It's actually showing me the suggestions over here, which I could just press tab and complete it for myself, but anyways, I'm just choosing to type it out. So what we want to do is we want to do player, because sometimes it's not correct actually, the suggestions. Player dot x minus equals, which just means that player dot x minus player underscore velocity. Okay, so minus equals player velocity would be the same as typing player dot x minus player velocity. Okay, so we're minusing the player velocity from the player dot x position. Okay, to make the player go left. And if we so now we want to check for the right key button. So if keys, so I'm going to press tab so that it completes it for me over here. If keys pygame k underscore right, basically we want to change the player dot x, and we want to add the player of velocity. Okay, so I'm going to just use this notation here, and then we want to check if the player has pressed the player has pressed the up button key. So if keys pygame dot k dot up, then we're going to change the y value. Okay, so player dot y, we are going to minus again the player velocity, player underscore velocity, And if the keys pygame dot down, so basically if it's the down key, then we want to add the player velocity. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, let me show you over here. This is our player, okay, and this is the x coordinate, this is the positive x coordinate, and this is the positive y coordinate. If we want to go left, we're going to be minusing the x coordinate, and if we want to go right, we're going to be adding the x coordinate to the x coordinate. And if we want to go up, then we're going to be minusing from the y coordinate, and if we want to go down, we're going to be adding to the y coordinate. However, there is a problem here. We are still going to, let's play this and let me show you what the problem is. So here we go. This is our player. And it's not working. One second. Let's play again. Why isn't this working? So I figured out the problem. The problem was that the keys and handle key presses are both outside of the outside of the while loop. So as you can see here, they're indented here, and so I need to indent them over here so that they are underneath the while loop, and so that they get called. So now if I press play, and ta-da, the keys are working and the player is moving on the screen. However, if you can see, when I go up, the player disappears. When I go sideways, the player disappears. And so we need to make sure that the player stays on the screen, so it stays within the boundary of the screen, okay, between the... Anyway, so what we're going to do here is we're going to add some conditions, okay? So now let me just explain it before I add the condition. So here's the player. Okay, he's moving around the screen, and this is the 0, 0 coordinate, and this is the width, and this is the height. And basically what we want to do is we want to check to see when the player moves left, if the player minus the player velocity is greater than 0, then we want to move the player, okay? However, if it is less than 0, then we want to stop. Okay, so we want the player to stop. We want it to stop over here. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to do. Okay, we're going to say and player dot x minus player underscore velocity is greater than 0. Okay, so if player dot x minus player velocity is greater than 0, then go ahead and move the player left. Okay. Same with the right, except the right is going to be a little different. Okay, so now when we move the player to the right side of the screen, okay, what we want to check for is if the player dot x plus the player velocity is less than the width. Okay, it's less than the width. However, we need to account for the player width as well. So we need to say the width minus the player width, so that we get this point over here, so that the player is over here, so that the player, when it hits over here, it does not go beyond these. Otherwise, if we say it's less than the width only, the player will be able to move outside the bounds. Okay, so over here we're going to type in and player dot x plus player underscore velocity is less than the width, okay, minus the player width. Okay, so now if we basically check for this, if the player plus the player x plus the player velocity is less than the width minus the player width, then go ahead and move the player right. Okay, now for the player up and player down, it's basically the same thing, and except that we're doing it for the y coordinate. So player dot y minus player underscore velocity is greater than 0. Okay, and over here it's going to be player dot y plus player velocity is less than the height minus the player height. Okay, so there we go. So now if we play our game and we try to move to the side of the screen, we are not able to. Okay, so just to check all of them, there we go, it's working. Okay, so now the next thing that we're going to do is we are actually going to create our star object, and we are going to display it on the screen. Okay, So what we need to do what we need for that is that we need two variables called star width and star height, and we're gonna set them to 70. And then what we need to do is we need to load the star image. Okay, so I have already loaded the star image onto my program here. What you need to do is you need to go to flaticon.com and you need to search for star, and then you'll get lots of star images. Okay, and you just select one and you download it as a PNG. Okay, and once you download it, you drag it and drop it into this folder over here so that it is with your main script. So main.py is over here and star.png is over here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called star, and we're going to set it to pygame.load.image.load, and we're going to type in the name of our image, which is star.png. Okay, so now we have our image and it is loaded and it is set to this variable called star. What we need to do now is we need to create a rectangle that is basically what it does is it allows us to change the x and y coordinate of the star. Okay, so we need to create a rectangle by saying star.pygame.rect, and then we need to give it an x and y coordinate. Okay, now we're going to do something a little different here. We want the x and y to be different every time we play the game. So every time the game is played, the star has a new x and y coordinate that is shown on the screen. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to import a function called import random. Okay, so I already have imported it. I've already typed in import random up here. So now we can use this function. Okay, we can say random.randint. Okay, and we need to have a value between 0 and the width minus the star width. Okay, so if we go back to our screen over here, we have this star on the screen, and we want every single time we want to play the game, we want it to select an x value between 0 and the width, but we don't want the star to go off the screen. We don't want it to, so we need to account for the star width as well. So we need to say minus the star width. Okay, so what we're going to do here is 0 up to the width minus star underscore width. Okay, this is going to be our x coordinate, and then for the y coordinate, random int from 0 to height minus the star height. Okay, and then what we need to do is we need to set the star random int randint. Okay, and then over here we need to set the star width and height, and we initialized that earlier, so we're just going to type in star width and star height. Okay, so here is our star rectangle. Okay, and what we need to do now is we need to display this star on the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass this star over here, this star variable, to our draw function. So we're just going to type in star here, then we're going to go down and type in star over here, and what we want to do here is we want to blit the star onto the screen. Okay, so we're going to type in window.blit, and we're going to type in the first variable is going to be star all caps, which is the image that we loaded, and the second variable is going to be star.x and star.y, which is basically the coordinates of the star. Okay, the x and y coordinates of the star, and we are just going to blit that onto the screen. Okay, so now we're done. We've basically displayed it on the screen. Let's just play and see what happens. Oopsies, I made a mistake here with. Okay, let's try that again. And ta-da, we have this star on the screen. However, we have a problem. The star is simply too big. So what we're going to do is we're going to close this, and we're going to go back to where we loaded the star, and we are going to type in pygame.transform.scale. Okay, and the first parameter of this function is going to be pygame.image.load star.png. Okay, and the second is going to be a tuple, which is the star width and the star height. Okay, So this is going to scale this image that we loaded into this star width and height. So now if we play again, ta-da, this star is small, and it is choosing a random position on the screen every time we play the game. So let's close this again and let's play it, and there we go, there's another random position. Okay, so now that we have our star on the screen, and every single time we start the game it moves to a random position, we want to move the star to a random position as the game is running. So after a certain amount of time we want to move the star to a random position. So how we're going to do that is we're going to initialize a variable called elapsed underscore time, and we're going to set it to 0. And then in the game loop what we're going to do is we are going to do elapsed underscore time plus equals 0.01. okay, so it's going to increase by 0.01 every single time. Now we want to check if elapsed time has increased to a certain amount, so or greater than a certain amount. So elapsed underscore time is greater than 1.5. okay, then what we want to do, let me just copy and paste this so I can't type it properly. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to call this function called move star, and we want to pass in the star as a variable, and we want to also set elapsed time underscore time is equal to 0. okay, so now this function has not been defined, so we're going to copy this here and we're going to define it down here. We're going to pass in the star, and we're going to so what we're going to do is we're going to change the x and y value of the star using the same method that we used over here, using random.roundInt. So what we're going to do is star.x is equal to random.roundInt 0 up to width minus star width. okay, and over here what we want to do is star.y is equal to random.roundInt 0 to height minus star height. Okay, so now we have a random position for our x and y, and so now if we play our game, the star is going to move to a random position after a certain amount of time. However, at the moment nothing happens when we collide with the star. So we are going to change that. We are going to add that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do if star dot collide rect with player. What we want to do is we want to move the star. So we want to call that move star function that we wrote, and then we want to do elapsed time is equal to 0, and then we are going to initialize a new variable up here called points, and we're going to set it to 0, and every time we collide with the star we are going to do points plus equals 1. Okay, so now currently points is not being displayed on screen, it is just a variable, and we need to display it on screen, but I'm just going to play this to show you how it's running. So every time I collide, the star moves to a new position, and that is it. So now what we need to do is we need to display these points on the screen. Okay, so we know how many points we've gotten. Okay, so we need to do that by what we're going to do is we're going to do pygame.font.init, and this will just initialize the fonts for us, and then we are going to do points font is equal to pygame.font.sys font, and we're going to set it to Comic Sans and a size of 30. Comic Sans and a size of 30. Okay, so we have our font over here initialized, okay, but we need to use it now. So first, before we can use it, we need to pass points to the draw function. So we're going to pass it to the draw function over here and down over here. Okay, and then what we need to do is so right after fill we want to do points to screen is equal to points font, points underscore font dot render. And now we want to set this to a string because we want to make sure that the points is a string, and we want to set the anti-alias to 1, and we want to set the color to black. Okay, so this creates our points to screen. So this creates our variable that has the font, that uses the font and to render the points onto the screen using the black color. So we still need to blit this onto the screen. So what we're going to do is window dot blit. Okay, and basically we want to pass in this variable that we just created, points to screen, and we want to pass in the width of the x and y coordinate of the x and y coordinate. So how we're going to do that is we want the text to be right in the middle of the screen, but over here on the top. So we're going to do width minus the width divided by 2 minus the text width divided by 2, okay, to get the x position. And for the y, we're just going to do 10. Okay, so over here what we're going to do is width divided by 2 minus points to screen dot get width underscore width divided by 2, and then that is basically our x, and for the y we're just going to do 10. And I think this is supposed to be a tuple, but okay, so now hopefully we will see our points on the screen. So let's play this, and ta-da, we have our points. So now let's see what happens when we collide. The points increase and we get to, however, the points increase indefinitely. We need to have a winning condition. So let me work on that now. Okay, so right now, we have the points displayed on the screen, and we have the player colliding with the star. So we need to have a winning condition. So what we're going to do is if points is greater than 10, okay, we're going to do winner underscore text is equal to you win. Okay, and then we're going to create a new function called display winner text, and we're going to pass in the winner text as a variable. And now we're going to copy this and we're going to create the function down here. Okay, so what do we want to do here? What we want to do here is first we want to create a new font up here. So we have a points font. We need to create a winner font. Oopsies. What's going on here? Okay, we want to create a winner font. Winner underscore font is equal to pygame.font dot same thing, but except we're going to change the size to 70. Okay, and then what we want to do is down here in the display winner font, we want to create, and just like we did with the point, we want to create the winner text, and we're going to use the winner font to render it. Winner underscore font dot render. We're going to pass in the winner underscore text. Let's just name this something else. Winner underscore text. Winner underscore text to display. Whatever, it's very long, but who cares? Winner text. Okay, and then we're going to pass in 1 for the anti-alias. I'm going to pass in black for the color, and then we're going to do the same thing. Window dot blit, and we want to pass the winner text to display and we want to, okay, so it's automatically set it to 10 and 10, which we do not want. We want it to be right in the middle of the screen, so we're going to do the same thing that we did earlier to make the player be in the middle of the screen, which is width divided by 2 minus winner text dot display dot get width divided by 2. Okay, so winner underscore text to display dot get width divided by 2, and then for the x coordinate we want height divided by 2 minus winner to winner text to display winner text to display dot get underscore height divided by 2. Okay, so this is just a tuple, so we're gonna just make it like that so that it's clear. Okay, so now what we need to do is, because we are doing this outside of our draw function, we need to do pygame.display.update. Okay, so now this is going to update this on the screen, and then we're going to do another thing. We're going to do pygame.time.wait or delay, and we're going to set it to 5,000. So this means that it's going to wait for 5 seconds. Okay, and then what we want to do is we want to call main again. So what this does is that it first, what happens here is if the points go above 10, we call this display winner text, passing in the winner text, and then we basically initialize the two variables, and we blit the winner text to the screen in the middle of the screen. Then we update the display, and we delay by 5 seconds, and then we call main again. Okay, and before we do this, we just need to so because we're calling main again, we need to make sure that over here outside of our while loop we are doing pygame.quit. Okay, so let's just play this and let's see what happens. So here's the star moving on the screen. We collide with it and our points increase. So let's wait till 10. And you win. Yay! Okay, so this is the game. And it restarts, and every time, and now if I press X, it basically ends the game. And that's it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and if you really like this tutorial, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you so much.